Fraternal correction is not fun. I don't know how many of you have done this, whether it's sororal correction or fraternal correction. But when you have to correct somebody, it's always been difficult for me. I don't know what it's like for you. It's difficult for me because I realize I bring my own problems. I bring my own blindness. I bring my own stupidity. I bring my own things I wish I hadn't said. I bring all that into the situation, and I can't not bring that. I have to do it. And we have a hint of that today in Ezekiel, the priest and the prophet. Ezekiel is speaking to the people about a change in their philosophy of responsibility. It's really kind of interesting. This is a big moment in the history of ancient Israel. So Ezekiel is referring to the watchman, the person who would be up on a tower or a wall, looking out over the countryside in the city, looking for anything amiss, and trying to tell people about it ahead of time. They didn't have police. And you may not know this, but until roughly 200 years ago, there was no such thing as professional police. But there were watchmen. And people would say, something looks wrong here. And people would go investigate, that kind of thing. And Ezekiel tells the people in this that the watchman is going to tell you when you're guilty of something, when you need to recognize your own fault, and that you would be responsible for your fault, not the collective. This is what the big shift is in their philosophy. In their social world up to this point, they thought of themselves as part of a group, which is great, but almost not as an individual. We are the other extreme. We're so individual, we hardly think of ourselves as part of a group. But they were the other way around. And this is a shift to tell them, if you do something wrong, you are responsible for it, instead of somebody in your family did something wrong and therefore everybody's responsible for it. This is a change that is telling us and reminding us of something much earlier in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, that you are your brother's keeper. You are responsible. Remember the Cain and Abel story? If you don't, go back and read it in the book of Genesis. Yes, you are responsible. But as Ezekiel points out, the Lord is telling him, if you see something is amiss and you don't say it, you're responsible too. Okay. So Jesus then is teaching us about how to correct each other. And he tells us to start one-on-one. But if that doesn't work, to go to 2 or 3. If that doesn't work, to go to the assembly. If that doesn't work, then, we'll be waiting for you. It's a wise way to do things, because everybody doesn't agree. I don't know if you heard the famous church joke, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, you will have disagreement. It's very true. In politics and in religion, it's absolutely true. So we are called to be responsible for each other and to notice. This is a hard thing in fraternal correction. I'll offer you an example in my own life. When I was the superior at St. Elizabeth's in Oakland, we had a lot of student friars there at the time, a huge parish, all this kind of thing. We had 27 friars in the community. I was appointed the superior. Okay. So whenever you had to call somebody in, Brother X, and say, you can't X, Y, Z, what would you hear first? Well, you do this and that and the other thing. Insert the zinger. You know how this goes, right? Okay. And the truth was, yeah, I've got my faults too, and my blindnesses. And it reminded me a bit of a funny story I heard one time about people with their faults. And when we're correcting each other, we have to be aware that we've got our faults when we're doing it. This is hard. But the funny story goes like this. So 4 businessmen were together, talking to each other over a cocktail hour. And one said, yeah, my big fault is gambling. I really do like to go off, and I've blown a lot of money on this. And another one says, I fool around a lot. And another one says, well, my big thing is I'm kind of lazy. And I make it look like I'm doing the work, but I'm really not. And then the 4th one wouldn't speak up, and they kept pushing him. Come on, we told you our stuff. Come on, what's yours? And finally, rather sheepishly, he says, well, I'm a gossip and I can't wait to get out of this room. Oops. But let's be aware of what our own blindness is when we point out things to others. And in fraternal correction, we need to say that. I've got my blindnesses too. And then you start with the process. This is what prophets are called to do. They're like watchmen. And Ezekiel also is the priest. It's not fun as a priest, believe me, telling people when they're wrong. And we get the zingers thrown back at us too. Like we do everything right? Yeah, hardly. But it doesn't mean that we're always wrong when we're correcting somebody. It means we have to approach it with the humility of recognizing I've got my faults too. And if you like to correct people, then you're a false prophet. If you find it hard, then you're probably really a prophet. I find it hard, and I think most of you find it hard. We can look at our society, we can look at our church and find faults, and we should point them out. Yes, we should. We should also celebrate what's beautiful and good, and not pretend everything is perfect, and not pretend everything is wrong. We've got to carry both of those things, and it's really darn difficult. But we're challenged to do that in the gospel today. And St. Paul points out to us, doesn't he, that this is really about love. Love is not always making people feel good and happy. That's not love. St. John Chrysostom had a great line. He said, the wound of a friend is more honest than the kiss of an enemy. Sometimes we might have to wound each other a bit with the reality. But we are called to be faithful to this ministry. Jesus gives us the courage to do it. I'll end with a line I read once from Edith Stein. Have you heard of her? Some have and some didn't. Okay. So Edith was a philosopher, Jewish woman, German, and World War II came. You know the story. She converted, she became a Catholic and a Carmelite nun. Eventually she was killed by the Nazis for both reasons, Jewish and Catholic and a philosopher, 3 reasons. All that put together. They didn't want people with brains around. She was one of them. But she did say, and I'll end with this, those who are silent also bear guilt. Don't be silent.